Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of PhD-Politico discussions. I'm really excited today to join my own local MP, David Johnston, who is the MP for Wantage and Didcot. Hi David, how are you?
I'm very well, Adam. Nice to meet you.
It's good to meet you too. So, you became an MP for Wantage in the 2019 general election in December. I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
what was it? Why did you want to be an MP? What got you interested in getting involved in politics?
So I grew up in East London, born on a council estate, went to a school where only 21% of people passed any 5 GCSEs in my time there. And I was therefore first person in family to university and then spent 16 years running organizations that helped young people, disadvantaged young people, to get a better education and a better job. So during that time, I saw a lot of the issues that it affected families like my own, but we worked with a lot of much more disadvantaged children than I had been, because I hadn't been disadvantaged. I mean, my parents had been, and so we did lots of work on things where we could change the individual life of that person. We could help them get on a better path, but you always knew that there were thousands and thousands and millions of people who were facing those things the same. And about a year before the election, I was reading the paper, and I didn't know at the time that was going to be when the election was, but I was reading the paper and the first 11 pages were about Brexit.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is mad. You know, all the things affecting people's lives are being ignored while people on both sides just keep arguing about a decision that's already been made. And this is not doing anything to help the young people I was supporting or the other things going on in their lives. And so it was at that point I decided I wanted to become an MP. I thought the election was going to be in 2022. It ended up being a lot quicker. So I didn't expect to be sitting here now, but that was the reason, to try and get us back to the things that actually affected people's lives, rather than just arguing about Brexit all the time.
And that's really interesting. So, I mean, as a politics student myself, obviously, I just remember the last Parliament was complete. It was all about Brexit, wasn't it? It was all about such a divided. And I have a lot of respect for any MP who wanted to go into politics at a time when it was so divided and there was such a horrible debate in our politics.
Well, my family and friends think I'm mad, and I mean, they thought I was mad beforehand, never mind that it wasn't long before COVID happened, and now they think they're definitely right to think I'm mad.
So I mean, obviously, so during the campaign, what were when you were knocking on doors, visiting local villages? What were the things that came up? Was it Brexit, or was it more local issues? What did you find?
It was a combination of things. So Brexit came up a lot, but it came up usually in one of two ways. Either people saying, I am sick to death of hearing about Brexit, or it came up in I voted to leave and you guys have not delivered this result. And of course, most people don't really, I mean, a lot of people won't know who their MP is, but a lot of people won't know the history of their MP. So some of them actually thought that I'd been part of the deadlock of not delivering the result, whereas actually I was just getting into politics for the first time. And I said, well, I agree with you. You know, I want to get this thing done, and so we can get back to things that affect people's lives. And I think that's why the Get Brexit Done message was so powerful, because you were either someone who'd voted to leave, and you thought that your vote had just been ignored by the political class, that it didn't really matter, or you were someone who'd voted to remain, but you respected the fact that it had gone the other way, and you didn't want to see your politics dominated by this one issue when there were lots of other things affecting your life. So yes, it did come up, but it came up in that context. And then, of course, there were the much more local issues about house building and GP appointments and Grove Station, which I'm trying to get reopened, and a whole load of other things, you know, illegal traveller camps and all kinds of things that came up. But yes, Brexit probably more than anything came up.
That's probably partly just the discourse. The only thing that fit the newspapers, as you said, is news channels So you won the election. You won in Wantage. It was 50.4% of the vote. And I'm just wondering, obviously being a new MP, what's that experience like? The first day you sort of go into Parliament, and I mean, it must be quite surreal to go into this sort of this quite old chamber, and it must be obviously quite almost a culture shock. I'm just wondering, what was that experience like?
Yeah, so I answer that in two ways. So firstly, on the night of the election, I mean, my count was 5 a.m. In the morning, and you get handed this envelope as the winner, and you think it's got all sorts of interesting stuff in it, and actually all it's got is a HMRC form for you to fill in your payroll details. I mean, it doesn't have anything, and there's no secret information about being an MP or anything like that. And by 8 a.m. I was already getting emails from constituents with their problems that they
really?
yeah, exactly, that they wanted me to solve. And of course, at that time, I mean, you can be contacted about literally anything as an MP, and you can't possibly know about all the things that you're contacted about. Your job is really to try and find the right information and the right answer for people. So I'm seeing these things, I'm thinking, God, I don't know what I do about that. And then of course we went into Parliament actually that weekend for some induction, and so I'd been to Parliament reasonably regularly because the charity that I ran did quite a bit of work with Parliament, trying to get different kinds of people into politics, more disadvantaged people into politics. So I'd been there quite a few times, but going as an MP was strange, and it was like, I mean, I'd been at this sort of not very good comprehensive school, and I suppose this was like going to a really posh, you know, like a really posh, I don't know, public school or a kind of Hogwarts sort of place, where there are all sorts of rules, where there are people whose job it is to sort of discipline, you know, you've got whips whose job it is to tell you what to do and keep you in line. And even to the point that we were all given a new backpack with you know, new laptop and this kind of stuff. I mean, it really did feel like, you know, welcome to your new school. These are the rules. These are the people you must obey. And it was, you know, very different to the school I had been at. I think we all had a feeling. I mean, we were all walking around as new MPs, you know, wearing the same backpack. You know, it was very much like we were all a lot younger than we actually are.
Yeah, well, I always find it incredible. Obviously, when watching debates in Parliament, obviously the very specific language you have to use. There's very sort of certain rules, what you can say, what you can't say, how you have to address people. How did you find that when you sort of had to first speak?
It's difficult, and so I did my maiden speech, which was the first time you speak in Parliament. I did it really quite early, so we'd been encouraged. We had about a week, because the election was the 13th of December. We had about a week before it was going to be Christmas, and that was just going to be devoted to the withdrawal agreement from with the EU. And we were encouraged not to do our maiden speech in that, because there were so many of the older veteran MPs who'd be trying to speak anyway, and it was, you know, a huge issue, and they'd been working on it for years, and so, you know, we were encouraged not to do that. And we were the first possible opportunity for us was in the Queen's speech debate week, where after the government laid out its programme in the Queen's speech, you then have a series of days which are themed according to the themes in that of policy. So, for example, the second day was about education. So that was a natural one for me to speak in, given that I'd spent all these years working with young people and working with schools. So I just got my maiden speech done as quickly as possible. And it's the only time where you can't be heckled. So there's a convention in the House of Commons that whenever anybody's giving their maiden speech, you're not allowed to make noise, interrupt. You're not allowed to make all the strange noises.
I didn't know that.
When the House of Commons is usually full.
And
so that's a good thing, because, you know, it's a nerve-wracking experience for people. and there are certain conventions about what you must talk about. So you shouldn't be controversial. You know, you shouldn't be saying, well, the Labour Party is awful for all these reasons, or the Conservatives are awful for all these reasons. And you need to pay tribute to your predecessor. You need, and essentially you need to tell the House of Commons about your constituency, what it's like, some interesting facts, and then say something about what you hope to do. And you need to be relevant in some way to what the debate is about, which in this case was education, and that was why I picked it. But you're quite right, there are so many rules, like you can't, for example, say you can't refer to you, because you is deemed to always be the Speaker of the House of Commons. So if you're saying, and this happened actually at PMQs this week, someone said, they were talking to the Prime Minister, but they were saying, will you now do this? And the Speaker got up and said, I don't think you mean me, I think you mean the Prime Minister. So yeah, there's all sorts of funny rules like that.
It's interesting. So obviously the big story of the last year, and it's incredible, it has now been a year since the first lockdown, is COVID. And obviously it's been such a horrible circumstance for so many people. But from an MP's perspective, especially a new MP, obviously you'd only been in the job for 3 months when we went into lockdown. How difficult was that, not being able to, especially quite early in the job, not being able to go into the constituency, speak to voters, and actually connect with people in the traditional way a new MP should or would?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you're quite right that one of the worst things about it was that what an MP would usually do in their first year is be going round to meet as many people as possible, going to all the events that go on, and just trying to hear from people about their concerns and tell them a bit about you and so on. And none of us were able to do any of that. Our inboxes all exploded. I mean, and MPs who've been MPs for 30 or more years say that they have never had the amount of communication, the amount of casework as they've had in the COVID period. So, you know, for us, it's like, goodness, is it always like this? You know, hundreds of emails every day. And you know, it's always very busy, but the veteran guys say, actually, no, this is off the scale. From we've never seen anything like this, because of course COVID's touched everybody's life, whoever they are, and whether they've got a business, or they're fearful for their job, or they've got a child who should be at school, or they just don't quite understand the restrictions and what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. Quite early on, there was, you may remember, there was this issue of a lot of people abroad where they've been you know, they've been on holiday or they've been traveling, and we needed to try and get them back, but countries weren't letting people in and out, and so so yes, it was a very big task very early on. In a funny kind of way, it leveled you with much more experienced MPs, because nobody had dealt with it before. So in normal times, an MP who's been there 25 years knows a lot more, can answer all your questions and your, you know, the junior ones, even though, I mean, the House of Commons likes to pretend everybody's on the same level because you've all got a constituency and you're all elected in the same way. But in reality, if someone's been there decades, you know, they are seen by all of us as a more senior person. Of course, with COVID, it didn't matter if you'd been there 3 months as we had, or 3 decades, you didn't know how to deal with something like this. You all had the same questions. You were all dealing with the same constituent problems. So in that way, it was a kind of funny leveler of experience between different MPs. And I just think, you know, we're hugely lucky, because yes, there's a lot of work, but, you know, COVID has had such a detrimental impact on the lives of so many of our constituents, and who are losing their jobs and who are seeing mental health problems in their families, with people having to stay in the house and so on. And, you know, those sorts of things like mental health and so on, they affect MPs and their families too. But you know, we've got a job security until the next election. We've got a a privileged position to be able to make a difference. And so it's I suppose quite humbling to see the way in which people's lives are touched, and that you are often their last hope to try and get something fixed.
That's all. That's really interesting. I mean, I think another thing I think is quite important, obviously, is there's going to be people who maybe didn't have access to technology, more isolated people, who probably have felt quite disconnected, not just from politicians, but from the rest of the world, essentially, in all over the country. What role do you think politicians now have to try to, not just you as an MP, but sort of local councillors as well, to reconnect with people who maybe have felt more isolated in the last year, to make sure they still feel represented by their local representatives?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question. I mean, in some ways, we've all probably had more people contact us than might have done in normal times, precisely because people have been at home, and as long as they do have that technological access, and not everybody does, but as long as they do have that technological access, I've received quite a number of emails from people who say this is the first time I've ever written to an MP. So in that sense, I probably have more electronic interactions with constituents than ever before. I think you are right. There is an issue of people feeling isolated, and our jobs really, I think, as soon as the restrictions are ended, one is just a general, let's make sure that people who are having difficulties can get the support they need from the right organisation. So if people are feeling very much alone, if it has affected their mental health, which it has in a lot of cases, we need to make sure the support is there for them. As MPs, I think our job is to get out there once we can, as much as we possibly can, to be visible, to be visiting the local shops and businesses that have had a really difficult time, the charities that have had a really difficult time, meet all the constituents for surgery appointments, which, I mean, like most people, I've been doing surgery appointments either by Zoom like this or by telephone, but you would obviously try and do those face to face if you can. So I think our job is really, and if you're new like we are, I suppose your job is really to try and have the first year again and get round to all those events that you would have been going to if you'd been able to. And certainly when restrictions were not in place during the course of the year, that's what I was doing, getting around as many local businesses and other things as I could. But obviously for huge parts of the year, I couldn't do that.
So my final question is about yesterday's budget announcement. And well, first of all, was there anything in there that you were particularly happy about or particularly noteworthy for your own?
I think so. I think there's several things I'm really pleased with from the budget. One of those is just extending the support that people have really benefited from until now. So, the system of furlough, of grants for people. There are certain things about VAT and business rates and so on for particular kinds of businesses, which lots of people had written and said, please, can you keep these going? So I'm pleased that they're being kept going. In terms of new things, I think trying to get young people on the housing ladder with 95% mortgages where you'll only need 5% deposit. I think that's a really positive thing. There's more money going into apprenticeships and traineeships and education catch up and things like that, things that I'm obviously really interested in. And as it happens, I mean, I really support the things which are being done for all those areas of the country that have been left behind. I mean, I think you saw yesterday the government putting its money where its mouth is regarding the levelling up agenda and, moving Treasury staff to Darlington like it always said it would, that government shouldn't all be concentrated in London. So there's the most powerful department having a lot of its people move to the northeast, and free ports and towns fund deals, a whole load of things which we promised in the general election, which are coming to fruition, as well as saying to businesses, look, you're going to have to pay a bit more in tax. You know, if you've been very successful, top 10% of businesses, if you've been very successful, we're going to increase the tax on you because we've got to pay for all this support we've given people.
Yeah, that was really interesting. Do you think? I guess maybe some of we saw it already from Boris Johnson in the manifesto of 2019, but I think we've obviously seen the furlough was extended to September, which is going to cost a lot of government money. Minimum wage is increased as well. And obviously, as you said, corporation tax for medium and large businesses is going to be increased in 2023. Have we seen? Has the ideology of the Conservative Party changed? I mean, it's interesting, right? Because obviously, in the noughties, it's kind of viewed as the austerity party. Cameron Osborne. Has the party ideologically, do you think, changed? No.
It's a good question. I suppose. Look, my view is that every political party is a coalition of people who think really quite differently on some issues. So the Conservative Party has always had people who, you know, at one end never want to see taxes go up. They only ever want to see them go down. They want government not playing a big role in people's lives. And then you've got people who think actually those who can pay more should pay more. Government does have an important role in a number of areas. So I suppose it's less that there's a total change of ideology, more that the balance has changed between the different groupings within the party. Now, part of that, I think, is that, you know, we won a whole load of seats last time, which actually, you know, the areas of those seats have not had the investment that they needed. They haven't had the transport links that they needed. They haven't had the education standards that they needed. And so those areas do need more public spending to them. So forget COVID for a minute. Those areas, you know, they needed to get a greater share of the public spending that was happening. But obviously COVID has then meant that, you know, the government has had to do some things which, you know, it had to shut down the economy and it had to get the health service essentially working on this one virus and not all the other things that it has been, just because the sheer number of people affected by it. And so that inevitably means that the government, if the government's shutting down the economy and telling people to stay in their houses, it's then got to support people through that, and that means government doing even more. So I guess it's a combination of what COVID's done, also of the seats that we've won, and I suppose that there are just generally there will always be a back and forth within parties. I mean, you see this in the Labour Party. You know, when I was at university, Tony Blair was the Prime Minister, very pro-market, very pro-capitalism, and was accused of taking a lot of conservative policies. And then until 2019, the leader was Jeremy Corbyn, who's the sort of complete opposite of that. So there are always natural swings as well.
David Johnston, thank you so much for your time. It's always I do appreciate it, especially as you're my local MP. So it's always good to meet my local representatives. Thank you so much for your time. Cheers.
No problem at all.
Hi guys, thank you for watching this latest episode of PhD-Politico discussions. If you enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to give it a like. And if you want to watch more content like this, then please do subscribe. Bye guys.